Out then with Dr. Simon Williams, Senior Lecturer in People and Organisation at Swansea University. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
When we can, I try and start with a bit of good news. Psychologically, clearly, it's better to wake up that way. But it's also trying to find the balance between acknowledging the seriousness of the situation we're in so that people are alert to it and follow the guidelines.
That's exactly right. I think you're right. It is important to have good news. I think it's also important to recognise the good that is being done and has been done by the vast majority of society. And whilst there has been this government focus on rule breaking over the past 2 days, we must remember that, again, as you mentioned, as the UCL study shows, as our research shows, the vast majority of people are really doing an amazing job and sacrificing so much to follow most of the rules most of the time, and have done since March. So again, I think to those people, we also need to say well done and give that encouragement and also keep doing what you're doing, because the end very much is in sight.
So do we spend too much time talking about the rule breakers? Should we be talking about then really significant, dramatic, heroic examples of people going the extra mile to make sure they don't spread this virus?
I think we should, actually. And I think whilst, obviously, I would say clearly those examples of rule breaking, whether they're illegal raves and house parties, which again are really a minority, a fraction of the population, even a fraction of rule breaking, really. I think we should also focus on the fact that there is a norm that the majority are really adhering to rules. And in some senses, creating this impression that, rules are broken more than they perhaps are, in an ironic way, might even, for some, encourage others to bend or flout rules, because this false impression that, well, everyone's doing it, so maybe I'll have a little house party of my own. So I think it is important to again focus on the resilience that we've shown, as well as clamping down on those extreme rule breakers.
Well, I tell you what, let's do that this morning then. Let's invite our audience to text us this morning or to send messages on social media and tell us how they've been going the extra mile to protect themselves and others from this virus. 85058. And I don't mean, and I know you wouldn't do this anyway, I'm not looking for kind of self-pity and, oh, look what I've had to sacrifice, or some kind of holier than thou decree about how wonderful you are. But genuinely, let's celebrate people who've said, right, I could do this, but I'm not going to because ... And let's give some attention to that this morning, because I think you're absolutely right. That's important for balance. Right, get in touch if you'd like to take part in that. I said, Simon, as well at the beginning, that there is this conflict between who's got the greater responsibility here. Is it the people making the rules, or the people either breaking the rules or just finding them hard to follow?
That's a great question. I think a bit of both. And, we talk about people, it'll be interesting to see people, call in about going the extra mile. I think one of the problems is there's a question mark over, whether the Prime Minister himself has gone an extra 2 miles. And I think, there's a need, obviously, for people in positions of authority to role model, even where rules aren't broken. Again, I think modeling this behavior of staying local, that it's in a sense that's clearly local, and obviously that's important there. I think there's also been this focus in government, and we saw it yesterday in the announcements that, well, the rules are clear, and people have been told the rules are clear, so you should understand them. And I don't think that's overly helpful, because of course in one sense it's more important to work backwards from asking people, do you think they're clear? And if a significant proportion of people are saying they're not clear, then in some sense they're not. And I think what is often forgotten is that it's not so much the rules in and of themselves, like saying, okay, well, let's look at this exercise rule. Over the last 10 months, for example, people have been told, okay, you can exercise once per day in certain contexts alone. And then we've moved through various phases where there's unlimited exercise outdoors. And of course, at some point, people could exercise indoors. And now we're back to exercising outdoors once per day with one other person in a socially distanced way. So there's just kind of like a lot of background noise, and we call this rule fatigue, really, or rule confusion, where, okay, the rule itself might be simple, but a lot of people struggle to say, well, what does this particular rule mean for me now in the moment? So in some ways it's harder to look at the rules now than it was back in March, where we were learning everything for the first time.
Yeah, it's interesting, that one, that whole kind of local issue. And the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, was asked about it yesterday. And could they absolutely clarify what local was? A lot of police forces have been saying they need to know as well so they can enforce the rules. But she didn't want to. And the police chief who was alongside her didn't want to. And I can sort of see why, because once you set a rule, how do you define it for different people? So let's say you call local within 5 miles. But what if you need to drive further than that to get to your local supermarket because you live in a particularly rural location, for example, or you need to go further than that to visit your support bubble? Is that then allowed? Can you run further than 5 miles, or do you need to run in loops close to your home? Can you cycle further than 5 miles, which isn't really very far if you're on a bike? So the minute you set a rule, it then becomes quite hard to apply to every different situation. So you can see why they are calling on people just to use their common sense, can't you?
In a sense, I mean, I think you're right that obviously, just us having this conversation in some ways though undermines this message from government that the rules are simple. I think, in a sense, you're right. The closer we look at this and scrutinize, the more we say, well, maybe it's not that simple. But I definitely would not like to be the one setting the rules. I'm much happier talking to you about how they apply and how we can unpack them, because it is difficult. But I think, for example, on the exercise rule, I think, Wales has currently done a decent job on that, where there's this rule about, well, the exercise must start and end at home. Although, again, some people aren't necessarily clear on that because that's been different at different points in the pandemic. But of course, you do need to factor in people's, where they live and so on and so forth. But I think, with the example that we've talked about again, it may seem a little silly, but almost doing laps up and down of Downing Street perhaps would set a better model than, than maybe going, further afield. Because again, a lot of people are, maybe doing that. They're going for walks around their block. Certainly in March they were, because they really wanted to reinforce this, let's really stay at home and only go out when absolutely necessary message.
Yeah, don't travel for exercise, just exercise near your home. Different in Wales, of course, Scotland and Northern Ireland. The rules are all different around this. In Wales, it's quite clear you can't meet anyone outside your household at all, outside of your particular support bubble. And do people broadly support that? It's a much clearer message anyway.
It is much clearer, as you and others have probably seen. We have had instances, when the weather was a bit better a few weeks back, where a lot of people were travelling to, the Brecon Beacons in Wales and these beauty spots to go for walks, and they would rationalise, well, I am staying local. Perhaps they lived 5 miles away, and of course, part of what's happening there is this rural blending that I was kind of referring to earlier, where that was actually the policy at some point. Stay local. Back post first lockdown. And other people are rationalising it by saying, well, I'm outdoors, and I've been told, which in some senses, of course, they're correct. The science says that the virus doesn't spread as readily outdoors. So, and I need this for my mental health, to get out and go for a proper walk. I live in maybe a town or something. So it is difficult because there are these justifications. I think, again, part of what is good about the regulation in Wales at the moment is it is as simple, I suppose, as possible. And so I think on balance, most people understand that exercise starts and ends at home. But,
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Obviously, different circumstances. Some people have easier access to green spaces and fresh air. A lot of people say in the local park is really crowded. It's safer to drive a bit further away. But all these issues are things we've been grappling with for the last 10 months now, aren't they? Our thanks to Dr. Simon Williams from Swansea University. Sorry, I just needed to check that. Senior lecturer in people and organisation. It's 6:17.